Thank you for viewing the Keystones to Opportunity Professional Development Session Number 5, Reading Apprenticeship webcast. As a review, the Keystones to Opportunity Grant's overarching goal is to improve literacy achievement for all students. Given the expectations for students graduating from Pennsylvania schools in the 21st century and the need for all students to be college and career ready at the end of grade 12, educators will need to rethink the ways by which they approach literacy instruction at all levels, including early learning for students ages birth through 5 years of age. Pittsburgh Public Schools received $10 million over the course of the next 5 years. This funding from the grant supports a new literacy plan for the district, monthly professional development sessions tailored to the needs of Pittsburgh Public Schools, new diagnostic assessments including DIBELS and GRADE, literacy specialists who provide RTII, data analysis, professional development, instruction and Common Core standard support in all PPS buildings, as well as the HEAT classroom observations for the targeted grade levels. A review of the 2010-2011 state-level reading PSSA results illustrated the importance of developing a comprehensive, coherent, and well-articulated literacy plan that can provide the direction for successful literacy instruction in 21st century schools. Pittsburgh Public Schools is modeling our comprehensive literacy plan after the state's plan. Specifically, the plan identifies important content, processes, and resources that will enable all stakeholders, including parents, caretakers, educators, and community members, to plan, develop, and evaluate instructional programs that support equitable and high-quality literacy instruction for all students. Content supervisors and KtO literacy specialists have been in the process of creating this plan throughout the school year, taking into consideration what is learned through the 9 professional development sessions funded under this grant. So far, these professional development opportunities have been provided by KtO through the Allegheny Intermediate Unit. These sessions are not only meant to improve practice as we transition into Common Core standards, but they also serve as that awareness of what is happening behind the scenes as content supervisors and KtO specialists create the district's new literacy plan. Anything learned in these sessions can be applied immediately in your classrooms. Today, we will be focusing on session number 5, Reading Apprenticeship, or RA for short. Reading Apprenticeship is a research-based instructional framework for middle schools and high schools. Reading Apprenticeship supports the goals of KtO by providing a common language for literacy instruction in content area classrooms, incorporating formative assessment in the daily routines of the classroom, and including students as partners in their literacy development. In addition, Reading Apprenticeship assists teachers in making the instructional shifts necessary to meet the expectations of the Pennsylvania Common Core. There will probably be, and there should be, moments in this session where you can say RA is already happening in your classroom. However, by the end of this presentation, you will also be able to connect Reading Apprenticeship with the 4 previous PD topics and see how they all tie together. Let's take a moment to review the objectives for this session. Participants will be able to describe each dimension of the Reading Apprenticeship framework, identify the 3 characteristics of an RA classroom, understand and articulate the connections among RA and Common Core standards, the Pennsylvania Comprehensive Literacy Plan, and previous KtO PD sessions. Lastly, we will be able to identify ways RA meets the needs of your school. Let's take a moment to talk about reading. Students often confuse reading with saying the words on a page. Reading is actually a complex problem-solving process that students can learn. Think about how we as adults process what we read. For topics that we are knowledgeable in, reading is not that complex of a task, and we can read it fluently with understanding because we know how to make connections and reference prior knowledge and experience with the text. But if we were reading complex text about complex ideas or an unfamiliar type of text, we are not so fluent, and we would have to work to make understanding of it. We would probably have a few false starts and need to do some backtracking. We would probably stumble over unfamiliar words or find ourselves having internal conversations with the author, silently agreeing or disagreeing with what we read. How many times with such a text do we find that even though our eyes have scanned several paragraphs, we have taken nothing in, so we have to reread these passages and really focus? Think about how this notion applies to students reading in our classrooms. If you are viewing this webcast as a whole group, please take a few minutes to discuss the following question. What are your current perceptions, practices, and assumptions about students' literacy in your content area? And what are the habits of good readers? Please take about 5 to 10 minutes and chart your responses. You can pause the webcast now. During the AIU's training of Reading Apprenticeship, some of our colleagues have shared the following as their assumptions about students' literacy in their content areas. For example, they shared that reading is only done in reading class. Students feel they don't have to read word for word, that they can just skim and scan. Students only read in school, not at home. They shut down when a text is too long or too hard, which shows a lack of stamina. They also think that anything worthy of reading must be interesting, and that they read just to be able to answer the questions. Perhaps some of these perceptions have matched the perceptions that you listed as a group. Also during the AIU training, we discussed the different practices. Some examples that we came up with during the training were active reading strategies such as highlighting, underlining, circling, or chunking text, looking for the main idea, this happens in all content areas, silent sustained reading, close reading, literature circles. In the EL classrooms, we have the DL pattern. In Read 180 classrooms, students have more access to high-interest books in order to encourage and improve independent reading. And lastly, one of the concerns that was brought up during this discussion was that we don't receive a lot of support for differentiated instruction. As far as the habits of good readers, let's move on to the next slide. In order for participants to understand the purpose behind the RA framework, we need to understand what the habits are of good readers. Let's take a few moments to review these habits and confirm responses that you may have had on your charts. The following key habits of good readers are widely recognized by literacy researchers. Good readers are mentally engaged, motivated to read and to learn, persistent in the face of challenge, socially active around reading tasks, strategic in monitoring the interactive processes that assist comprehension, such as setting goals that shape their reading processes, monitoring their emerging understanding of text, reasoning with text in valued and discipline-specific ways, and coordinating a variety of comprehension strategies to control the reading process. Let's take a look at the Reading Apprenticeship framework. Reading Apprenticeship continues the literacy instruction which begins with the building blocks of literacy. Reading Apprenticeship is targeted for both middle schools and high schools, thus facilitating literacy transitions by providing a common framework and language for literacy instruction. The following model describes the 4 key dimensions of classroom life that are necessary to support reading development. Establishing a Reading Apprenticeship classroom begins with the work of nurturing a social environment in which students can begin to reveal their understandings and struggles, as well as to see other students and their teacher as potential resources for learning. The personal dimension of Reading Apprenticeship focuses on developing individual students' identities and self-awareness as readers, as well as their purposes for reading and goals for reading improvement. The cognitive dimension of the framework focuses on increasing students' repertoire of mental tools or their cognitive strategies for making sense of text. Like many other factors in reading, knowledge, whether about the world of ideas in a text, the ways particular texts work, or discipline-specific ways of thinking and using language, supports reading comprehension and also develops as a result of reading. Surrounding the social, personal, cognitive, and knowledge-building dimensions of classroom life is reading itself, or extensive reading. At the center of the Reading Apprenticeship approach and linking the 4 dimensions of classroom life is an ongoing conversation in which teachers and students think about and discuss their personal relationships to reading, the social environment and resources of the classroom, their cognitive activity, and the kinds of knowledge required to make sense of text. This metacognitive conversation is carried on both internally and externally. Teachers should model how to make their thinking public and provide opportunities for students to make their thinking public. In other words, making the invisible visible. We want to take some time to connect the Reading Apprenticeship framework to the Common Core and have an activity built in. This activity will take about 10 to 15 minutes, so if time permits and you are in a whole group session, the directions are as follows. Read the introduction of the Common Core State Standards for English Language Arts and Literacy in History, Social Studies, Science, and Technical Subjects handout that's provided in your packet. During reading, list which of the Reading Apprenticeship Framework dimensions connects to one or more of the various descriptions. Then discuss as a whole group your findings. For example, you may find that the social dimension relates to the description that college and career-ready students come to understand other perspectives and cultures. The purpose of this activity is to understand the descriptions of what constitutes a college and career-ready student and to understand how the Reading Apprenticeship Framework will support students in becoming college and career ready. When finished, take a few minutes to share your findings with the group and then take a moment to reflect on the following question. Knowing that the Reading Apprenticeship Framework supports college and career readiness in students, how will you emphasize or implement the 4 dimensions in your instruction? If you have the time to complete this activity, you may pause the webcast now. If time does not permit, let's just continue on with the webcast. More reading, more text-focused discussion, and more talk about reading and problem-solving processes. These distinguish Reading Apprenticeship classrooms from content area classes in which students are expected but not taught to handle complex reading tasks. This quote serves as a segue to the next part of our presentation, which is what a Reading Apprenticeship classroom looks like. There are 3 characteristics of a Reading Apprenticeship classroom. Each of these characteristics are explained further in the slides to follow. There is also a What Does a Reading Apprenticeship Classroom Look Like handout in your packet. Please keep these characteristics in mind as a reflection tool when lesson planning and with colleagues for peer observations. They can also serve as a guide for administrators' classroom walkthroughs. The 3 characteristics of a Reading Apprenticeship classroom which are paramount include a focus on comprehension, a climate of collaboration, and an emphasis on student independence. A Reading Apprenticeship classroom, regardless of subject, is one that focuses on comprehension. Reading Apprenticeship is embedded in subject area learning in which students develop strategies, identify and use text features, build topic knowledge, and carry out discipline-based activities while reading course-related materials. The work of comprehending reading materials takes place in the classroom. The teacher scaffolds the learning and serves as a model and guide. The work of comprehending is metacognitive. How readers make sense of text is as important as what sense they make of it. The climate of a Reading Apprenticeship classroom is one that focuses on collaboration. Class members draw on each other's knowledge, serving as resources to make sense of text together. Class members respect and value problem-solving processes. Classroom norms support risk-taking, students share knowledge and confusion, and work together to solve comprehension problems. Grouping arrangements support collaboration and inquiry. Students work independently, in pairs, in small groups, and as a class, depending on the task and the text. A shared vocabulary to describe reading processes and text features is evident in classroom talk, materials in use, and materials on display. Student independence is emphasized in a Reading Apprenticeship classroom. Students are agents in the process of reading and learning. They actively inquire into text meaning, their own and others' reading processes, the utility of particular reading strategies, and their preferences, strengths, and weaknesses as readers. Students are expected and supported to read extensively. Course-related materials are available on various levels, and accountability systems are in place to ensure that students read large quantities of connected text. Over time, students are expected and able to do more reading, make more sophisticated interpretations, and accomplish more work with text with less support from the teacher during class time. Reading apprenticeship classrooms can also be recognized by a number of other classroom characteristics. For example, materials. What materials are present? How are they being used? What kind of work is displayed in the classroom, on the walls, on the board? Groupings. How is the classroom arranged? What kinds of groupings are students in as they carry out classroom tasks? What do these arrangements offer students as learning environments? Tasks and activities. What activities are the teacher and students engaged in? What activities seem to be routine in this classroom? Who is doing the work of reading and comprehending? Teaching and learning roles. What roles do the teacher and student play in classroom activities? Does the teacher model, guide, and collaborate in comprehension, as well as give instructions, assign, and question students? Do students pose questions and problems as well as respond to questions about course readings? Do all members of the classroom community collaborate in comprehension, share their knowledge and experience, inquire? Classroom talk. What does the teacher say to the class, to small groups, to individual students? What do the students say to the teacher, to each other? What do the teacher and the class talk about? What kind of language is being used? As I mentioned earlier in the introduction of this session, there will probably be and should be moments during this where you can say that reading apprenticeship is happening in your classroom. And many of you were probably thinking that as I read this slide. So let's move on and connect reading apprenticeship with what we've learned so far this year through our other KtO professional development sessions. The Reading Apprenticeship Framework supports many aspects that fall under the Keystones to Opportunity grant, especially the Pennsylvania Comprehensive Literacy Plan and all 9 of the Keystones to Opportunity professional development offerings. Reading Apprenticeship is an instructional framework for addressing academic literacy needs in middle and high school classrooms. Therefore, the Reading Apprenticeship Framework is closely aligned with the Pennsylvania Comprehensive Literacy Plan. This is the plan that content supervisors and KtO specialists are currently writing for our district. It is also closely aligned with the Common Core standards in that it addresses reading, speaking, writing, and listening with an emphasis on empowering students to make their own sense of complex text. Reading Apprenticeship connects with other KtO PDs thus far. For example, Bernhardt's multiple measure. The Reading Apprenticeship Framework incorporates multiple types of formative assessment in the routine practices of the classroom, this multiple measure being student learning. It also supports the development of positive values, beliefs, and attitudes about reading and learning, this multiple measure being perceptions. Universal design for learning. Reading Apprenticeship connects to each of the 3 brain networks through the different dimensions of the framework. Recognition network is supported mostly through the cognitive and knowledge-building dimensions. The strategic network of the brain is supported through metacognitive conversation and the cognitive dimension. The affective network is supported through the social and personal dimensions of the Reading Apprenticeship Framework. Building blocks of literacy. Reading Apprenticeship supports the ongoing development of oral language through metacognitive conversations and discussions in a Reading Apprenticeship classroom. Lastly, transitions. Reading Apprenticeship offers consistency of language and routines across transitions when implemented in both middle and high schools within a district. To conclude this training, the Keystones to Opportunity team hopes we've met our objectives with you. To recap, we have described the dimensions of the Reading Apprenticeship Framework, we have identified the 3 characteristics of an RA classroom, and we have made the connections between Reading Apprenticeship and Common Core, the Comprehensive Literacy Plan, and the previous KtO PDs. We want to leave you with the following questions to achieve our last objective, which was to identify ways Reading Apprenticeship meets the needs of your school. Please take these last moments to reflect, share, or discuss these questions. How have your perceptions and/or assumptions about students' literacy in your content area changed based upon what you learned in this session? And how would Reading Apprenticeship improve literacy at your school and provide sustainability? Thank you for your attention and participation in the Reading Apprenticeship training, and we are looking forward to informing you about the next KtO session titled Literacy Design Collaborative. Thank you.